Hey there, welcome back to the shop. Working on the passenger door today. These are kind of aftermarket doors from South America. So kind of like, again, anything else. Some quirks expected. What we're working on today, this door actually had a bow in it. It was kind of a banana shape. So when you put it up against the door striker, it would be sticking out on the bottom, sticking out on the top, and you can't really adjust that out with the hinges. They can do kind of some degrees, but when you got a bow, the hinges can't help. So working on that today. I will say the seller's been pretty good. Kind of raised the issue. They said, swap it if you need to. I asked them kind of point blank, I can take a crack at working on it, but obviously you've got to do things like drill out spot welds and stuff that are destructive. They said take a crack at it. If it doesn't work, you can still send it back, which was awesome. Obviously, it's faster for me to fix it than deal with sending it back and waiting on a new part. I am wasting a little bit of my time, but I thought I'd share a little bit. I am a little bit ahead of the curve. I've been playing around a little bit already, but thought I'd share in case anyone else runs into it with their doors. It's kind of a helpful tip. It's just kind of a good example of making some tools on the fly to get some work done. So enough yakking, let's get to it. So just a little quick background too as to why I ended up going with replacement doors versus kind of patching. These are the doors that were off it. Again, it was a daily driver for a long time up in Wisconsin here, which is incredibly hard on a vehicle, especially these kind of 70s, 80s cars. Bottom's blown out. We actually had patched that once before in the 80s, so it had been cut off and re-seamed once. Most patch panels, you can kind of get away with that bottom part. They usually go about up to this hinge because they don't want to go into that area. So if you come across, we're down in this area where the patch panel would end. If you look at the sides, it goes up to about here, so you'd have to be reworking some of this metal as well. Likewise, it's a little bit punky around the door handles. So all in all, just kind of a pretty rough door. The driver's side and the passenger side are pretty similar. So just quite a bit of work on these doors to get them back. Being up here in Wisconsin, it's not easy to find suitable replacements, so you're kind of shipping them either way. So that's where we took a crack at the South American doors. So like I say, it had a bow in it here, and interestingly enough, so what I finally figured out that sort of works, you've got holes here, and there's actually one in the middle that are already there for the interior clips, so they're the right size for like an M8. So what I ended up doing was grabbing some long M8s with some big fender washers so you don't pull too hard on this inner panel, and that let me put some force this way and this way to push out on the center panel here, which would basically be where you need to push to get rid of that bow. I tried that without touching the door, and you can really crank on it and it would stay put, which makes sense because that's how the construction of the door works. This flange is pinched and then they spot weld it kind of coming down the side. So that all ties everything together into a cube. And obviously as you work on that, it's all tied together and it doesn't have any give in it, which is the whole point of a door. You can actually see where they got this metal a little bit hot. And I think that's what started the issue. When they were working on the door, you can see the heat that they got into this area, which, anyone that works on sheet metal, when you get it hot, it's going to want to shrink when it cools back down. So what that did was shrink this flange and warp it, which brought this in. So then when they put the skin on and clamped it, it put a curve in it. And then once it's all tied together, it's hard to get the curve back out. There's actually some pretty good videos around why that shrinkage occurs. It's kind of interesting physics there. I'll put a link up in the corner. But what I ended up doing here was basically, this is where the bow was. You can kind of work on the window frame. You can kind of flex that easy enough because it's not quite as structurally sturdy. But what I ended up doing is drilling out these pinch spot welds. There's 3 along this back flange. which released this outer skin from the inner skin. So then when I put my piece of unistrut back in with my clamps, my bolting clamps, when you pushed on that skin, it actually let this inner skin flex, and took a little bit of work with the hammer just to kind of let it loosen up, because this pinch actually holds it a little bit as well. But by releasing those pinch weld or spot welds and putting this pressure on there again, you can actually see, you can actually see how this skin, the inner skin, works towards the front of the vehicle. You can see-ish how that spot weld is no longer centered anymore where I drilled it out. So that's basically when I pushed that inner skin forward, that flange kicked out, which would have brought it in. And this is what was really preventing it from straightening out as you put that pressure on it. Not as much movement on the top and bottom. There's a little bit you can see on the top. The bottom's pretty stable, which would make sense. The bottom's got the radius. Most of the issue was in this middle section. But now the nice thing is, when I throw a straight edge on it, it actually sits pretty good. It's not perfect, but before there's about an 1/8 inch gap there. You could actually set it on here and it would clear the dimple for the door handle. That's how kind of out of whack it was. But now that we've got it pressed out, you know, you can throw a straight edge on it and it's pretty good. I know there's going to be some warping I have to do with the top panel here. You know, you just got to give it a little bit of a gentle caress to get that to line back up. But we were able to do that on the driver's side. My other thing I've noticed is this inner rail. This one is sitting a little bit high. I think we'll be able to work that down. You know, that's not super structural. It's just a little bit high. So we'll have to work on that. And then the other quirk that I noticed on this door, whoever made this door was just having a bad day. You know, maybe they had a extra long lunch break. I don't know. But if you look at the hole over here, it's basically kicked down. So we're going to have to nibble that up just a little bit. The bottom hides underneath the door handle. You know, this door handle sits in there. But this is just a little bit low, so it's a little bit crooked. The one on the driver's side is actually right. So again, it seems like this passenger side door was just one of those Friday afternoons. Somebody was a little bit tired. So we'll have to work on that. And then the other quirk, just as a heads up for anyone at the door, this one was actually luckily pointed out to me by another member on the I Hate Mud forum. I probably would not have noticed, to be honest. This door limiter bar, it sits too high, so we're going to have to blow out those spot welds and bring them down. Not a super big deal, easy enough to do now. Unfortunately, the guy in the mud forums didn't notice until after they painted it, which is a bit more of a problem. So right now we can drill those out, bring them down. You can kind of see it on the driver's side as well. It's just sitting a little bit high. For whatever reason, those are mounted up, easy enough to fix, but that's one of those things on the list. So if anybody has these doors and sees that, you know, beware. I don't know if it's a model year thing, where maybe the 78s and up are higher, I don't know. This is a 76 Cruiser. It could be something like that, you never know. But if you have one, just check those before you send them off to paint, or you may be repainting at least the inners of your doors to fix those, or finding some creative solutions. So back at it. Doors, like I say, pretty straight. What we're going to do now is send these spot welds back home. We'll have to clean them up. That should help hold the door structurally. I did test releasing the pressure from the bar. It stays pretty straight, so I'm not too worried about a whole lot of force bringing it back. But you know, if we send those now where it is where it's supposed to be, I have pretty good confidence that they will stay. And then when you bring the pressure off, it should stay pretty darn straight. If not, we'll have to pop them back out and give her another try. But for now, we'll fire up the old Miller and pop those spot welds in and see how she looks when we bring that back up. And on the side, the block is out here getting a nice suntan. It's back from the machinist. I had to touch up a little bit of the paint. I had actually painted it before it went there. I didn't plan on getting it as deep as I did, but luckily paint held up pretty good even through the bath. Just touched it up, but looking pretty spiffy out in the sun, getting a little suntan. Bzz. Bzz. That'll do, pig. Yeah, still sitting pretty good. So that guy's loose. Before we take it all the way off. Still sitting pretty good. Not too shabby. I'll take it. Whoops. So there's just a better view of the what I had set up there. Just had this fender washer sitting on the inside of the inner door skin, and this was just out there to snag on that unistrut. Same on the top, and then I just had a piece of pine spacer block in the center section there, just anything to give me a relatively spaced out pressure point. You know, you don't want to put a fine point. You want to spread that load out a little bit. One minor casualty. So one minor casualty, it did flex this dimple out and it cracked the upper seam. We'll have to give that a little bit of a tack and a little bit of a whack with the hammer. Pretty minor, it's just where the inner door clips go. You actually could probably get away without doing, without welding that up. Pretty minor, easy to fix, but as you put that pressure on the inside, it forced that dimple back out, at least on the upper here. Seemed like that's where a little bit more of the load went. Well, in good news, if you look down the door line now, the inner's sitting pretty close, and it follows it kind of all the way up now. I got to flex the upper end just a little bit, but pretty minor. If I find ye oldie magnet, this was my handy dandy door holder. That's actually looking pretty good. So it's probably hard to see on camera now, but bottom of the door sits pretty much where it needs to be, and that actually follows it up. There's still maybe a whiff of flex in it. We'll have to keep working there a little bit, or at least in the ballpark. Before it was pretty noticeable. Now we're in the land of OEM quality back in the day. So next on the list, a quick hitter is this door handle hole. For whatever reason they punched it a little bit crooked. This side is low. You can see he's got a little bit of a droop there. Again, I don't know if it was one of those Friday afternoon too many cold snacks kind of problem, but you know, just hiccups on this door that you don't see on the driver's door. So it seems like it is kind of a quality control slip through kind of thing. But if you slap the door handle in there, it does sit pretty close, but there's just not a lot of room. There should be a little bit of free play there. So we got to nibble out this hole just a little bit to bring it up. Other than that, the door handle does sit pretty good. There's enough wiggle room in the mounting holes. That's the only issue that we really got to clear out. So we got to take the die grinder, bring him up just a smidge, clearance that. So I'll take care of that quirk. So if we pop the door handle back in, we got a little bit of clearance on this side now to adjust the door and give it clearance for when it operates. Pretty much how it needs to be. Got wiggle room to move it around to align it up, so feeling pretty good there. That will do. So as far as problemo trace, this mount for the door limiter switch, or not switch, but strap basically, it's too high. For some reason it sits up. See if I bring it on down. There's a strap that comes straight out from here. If you look, it would land about with the bottom of that hinge. So these have to come down maybe a ½ inch. Not real big deal. It's just a couple spot welds. Pop those out, bring it down, weld them back in. Why they're off, I'm not sure. It could be a model year thing. This is a 76 tub. I don't know. My guess is it's just a quality control thing. But the other side is actually the same way. If you look at the driver's door, it's up the same distance. So it seems like they're consistently off. But we'll bring that back down, drill out those spot welds and tack them back in. I got to do both sides on that one. But we'll rip through this guy and see if we can get it moved down. Well, how far are you going to open, friend? All the way. Okay. Yep. Whoop, too far. That'll be all right. A little thinner fella. Boom! Interesting little nugget. Went to check how the OEM ones were shaped. So they're pretty similar. Pretty similar bracket. Interesting enough, the OEM ones are actually welded on the end as well as spot welded. So we'll probably do that, which will give it a little more structure, but kind of an interesting nugget that the OEM one's got the full send. And oddly enough, it worked out in our favor this time because it would have been a little harder to bring these off the new doors, but let's go get her back on. Well, minor change plans. So this is the one that was on there. If you throw it up there, it doesn't really want to sit right. You can kind of move it around and get it close, but for some reason this angle doesn't match the angle that they cut into the door. You can see it's just not the same. So that was going to go in the bin. So I went and liberated the mount off of the factory door that we won't be using anyway. And lo and behold, slots right in. So I'm going to grab both sides and throw them in the blaster so they're nice and clean. And we'll get them tacked on. Number one, number two, time to get them cleaned up. Just a smidge better. So I was gonna kind of estimate and ballpark it, but that's kind of how they ended up where they did in the first place. So I went in the parts bucket, grabbed the mechanism that goes on the firewall, and we'll just use that to get it right where it needs to be. So let's get that tucked in. Well, through the magic of working off camera, adjusted the hinges a little bit, worked that ledge kind of with a hammer, body hammer to bring it down. So those are in line again. That was pretty minor. Door seams are looking pretty good. This sits out just a real little bit on the bottom still, just a touch. You can kind of work the hinges in and out, but I think we can bring this door corner back just a little bit. If need be, we can do the same thing we did over there, pop these 2 spot welds out and kind of pull on it. But I think we'll be able to get that. In general, it's sitting pretty good, kind of pretty even all the way down. Sitting square across the top, down around the sides, so feeling pretty good there. I think this mirror mount is crooked, to be honest. Well, all right then. I don't know if I got anything to go off of there. I guess you can go this way. So 2 7/8 and 2 3/4. Yeah, so that is a little bit crooked. I ended up ordering some Defender mirrors, so I got to make a bracket for that anyway, so I think we'll be able to kind of hide that little quirk. Curious to look on the driver's side. That looks a little bit better. 2 3/8, 2 3/8. So yeah, that one's a little bit straighter. Minor. But otherwise, that's been relocated, seam's been fixed, that's been adjusted on the top rail. Got a little bit more of the same to do on this side, just the door limiter hinge point. I got to blast that off and we'll put the OEM one in there, kind of similar, pretty quick job. Knock that out, be done with it. Come out. There you go. Well, thanks for riding along. Door's pretty well dialed in. I think it's good enough that we won't have to put her back in the mail, which is good. I'm curious to see if the seller adjusts the price at all. There is a little bit of oil canning. I don't know if you can hear that. So a little bit of work left to do there. We may be able to just do a little bit of heat shrink to bring that out. There's a little bit of tweaking left to do. Not too bad. Most of the door is pretty stiff. It's just this slight corner right about in here. So theoretically, a little bit of heat it up and let it shrink should bring some of that out. Obviously, as we push that forward, it adjusted kind of this crimp. So a little bit there. But not bad, sitting pretty good. Probably as good as the original from the factory, so feeling pretty good there. So that'll do it. Hopefully it helps if you happen to pick up any of the South American aftermarket FJ doors. You kind of at least know what you're getting into. Nothing's insurmountable, but they're not perfect, so just buyer beware. But that'll be it for today. Kind of slowly working our way backwards. Got some work on the hardtop to do possibly next. And then got to do the windshield and the rear doors. And then mixed in there somewhere, waiting on some rings and some clips. Got the block to reassemble, which that'll be nice, get some parts out of the basement, get the block back together and sealed up tight to keep junk out of it. And we can get that back on the chassis. Should work out pretty good. We can kind of pull the body off, put the drivetrain back in, make some room in the shop, and kind of inching ever closer to paint and reassembly. So thanks for riding along. I'm going to knock out the other side, clean up the shop, grab some dinner. Thanks for riding along, and we'll catch you on the next one.